Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire, I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. Happy Halloween. Week 8 is in the books, and we will be looking at all of the Sunday and Monday games, touching on a couple of the trades today. Not a ton of fantasy-relevant trades unless you're in deep IDP leagues. But we will start, as we do every Tuesday, with a look at the Fantasy Football Roundtable Redraft League. Dennis Chubb's broken wheel moved to 7-1. I was pleased, but not as pleased as a certain co-host who might have been the high scorer for our league this week.
It's all starting to come together. Burrow's getting healthy. Probably now my biggest worry is I'm waiting for Jefferson to come back off of IR, and they lose Kirk Cousins, and they picked up, they got Jaren Hall, and they picked up Joshua Dobbs.
Yeah, you got to expect Dobbs is going to be the starter. I think that's why they went.
Right. But, we saw Joshua Dobbs is like a banana. So by the time you get to week 5, he's brown and his skin is thin and he's kind of mushy. Week 1, week 2, he's nice and firm, delicious. So he's faded pretty good in Arizona to where they were like, Kyler might not be ready yet, but we're going to give this Clayton Tune kid a shot. Thanks, Joshua. So I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully Dobbs does the right thing, which is throw the ball to Justin Jefferson when he gets back. You know what game I was watching closely last night? Bennett half versus Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes was down 15 or 16 points. Jackie was done. And Daniel had Jacoby Myers, Josh Jacobs, and Josh Reynolds going last night. I thought for sure he was going to get his first win, to the point where I felt like I was lying to my wife when she said, "Do you think I have a chance?" And I was like, "Yeah, there's a chance." But I'm like, "No, there's no chance." And he lost. What was it? 126-1. Like, it wasn't even close. He still lost by 8 points. And he had Jacoby Myers, Josh Jacobs, and Josh Reynolds going. I was just like,
yeah, it was not a good night if you had pass catchers for the Raiders. We will get to that and all the other games. But first, who else it wasn't a good week for? That would be the Los Angeles Rams. They went down to play the Dallas Cowboys, and 43-20 Cowboys victory. Dennis, the Rams started out strong, but preseason we weren't sure they were a great team, as they're kind of a younger team trying to rebuild, worried about Stafford's health. He went out with an injury, and in this one, they don't have a lot going in the running game. Do you think this is more like the Rams we were expecting to see?
Yeah. The Rams, they just don't have any depth. Puka surprised them by providing depth at wide receiver, but their offensive line has been challenging. Their defense is getting old, and they're gonna play hard, and McVay's gonna scheme stuff up. But when you have a team like Dallas that is just can be super explosive, once they get down and they get one-dimensional, and maybe it'll pick up a little bit when they get Kyren Williams back. That may certainly help because, Royce Freeman and who's the other joker there? Not Samaje Perine.
Daryl Henderson.
Yeah. So that doesn't bode well if that's your running game. You're trying to keep the defense honest. So if Kyron Williams comes back and is close to what he was before the injury, that's certainly going to help to eat up some clock and keep them in games and get their defense off the field. But I don't think any of us were picking the Rams to win the West.
For Dallas, we talked about Tony Pollard a little bit on Friday. 12 carries, 53 yards, caught one pass. Do you like him more as an RB2 going forward than kind of a top RB1?
Until they figure out how to use him, but it's Mike McCarthy, so I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I think you gotta feel like he's an RB2 with high RB1 upside. I mean, he's currently RB16 in points per game, but he's averaging about 16 attempts and 4.8 targets per game. You'd think he'd be able to be more productive on a Cowboys team that is actually averaging about a point more per game than they did in 2023 or 2022.
Next up, we move. The Minnesota Vikings went to battle the Green Bay Packers and got a 24-10 win to move to 4-4 on the season. But Dennis, Kirk Cousins is now out for the year with a torn Achilles. Jefferson's still on IR for the time being. They, as you mentioned, made a trade to acquire Josh Dobbs to compete with Jaron Hall. But is this a pretty big setback for the Vikings?
Yeah, I think they were going to be iffy even with Kirk Cousins. Now the defense has started to play a lot better of late, and if you're an IDP guy, Donnell Hunter and Ivan Pace both been playing well. Harrison Smith from the safety position, but they're 13th in points for headed into week 8, and they're 13th. Now they're 14th after week 8. The passing game was productive for fantasy. They had the QB 8, the tight end 2, the wide receiver 1 before Jefferson went out, and the wide receiver 5 with Addison since the last 3 games since he's been in there. The weak point on offense was the running back. Madison was RB20, and they thought so much of him they brought in Cam Akers to see if they could get a boost in the running game. So there was some fantasy production there. I'm not holding out a ton of hope with Josh Dobbs and Jaron Hall. Hopefully when Justin Jefferson gets back, they do the right thing and throw the ball to Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, it's curious. They traded to get a quarterback, which would make you think that they want to still try to continue, but they also traded an offensive lineman, which wasn't an area of strength. So interesting for Minnesota.
For a mobile quarterback, so maybe it makes sense.
I guess. Meanwhile, the Packers, they started out 2-1. They've lost 3 straight games. The offense, a lot of growing pains. Is this just kind of the result of having a real young roster?
Part of it is the result of Jordan Love only being able to get over 60% completions in 2 of 5 games or 2 of 7 games. He's got to be better. Whether it's the receivers have to do, like I always told my son as a kid when he was playing catch, I'm like, look, man, your job is to make the quarterback look good, i.e. the quarterback being me. And they need to maybe do a little more of that for Jordan Love so they get that completion percentage up, keep building his confidence. But also in week 8, they had a 41-17 pass run ratio. And on the season, they've been averaging about 57 to 43% through the first 6 games. 70-30 in week 8, that's not good for them. I mean, Dylan and Aaron Jones have to do better and uphold their end of the deal.
Next up, the Atlanta Falcons traveled to play the Tennessee Titans, who got the 28-23 victory. Dennis, in the second half, Desmond Ridder came out and Taylor Heineke went in. They said it was injury-related, not performance-related, even though Ridder cleared concussion protocol. Now, today, Arthur Smith said he's still weighing options for who is going to start in Week 9. Do you think we're going to see Taylor Heineke more this season?
Yes, we are. We're going to see him this week, as a matter of fact. Ridder was completing a decent percentage, almost 65% of his passes. And I'll gladly take that over Heineke's 57% completion rate. But Heineke, so there are quarterbacks that will take the chance and force the ball in there, and quarterbacks that don't. Heineke will. And, he earned his nickname for a reason, and it didn't take long after he got in there for Hospital Heineke to send Drake London to the tent.
Yeah, it was good news for Kadero Hodge, though, if you're playing him in a deep league. On the flip side, we got to see Will Levis for the first time this season and did not disappoint. 238 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Were you impressed by Levis?
Well, the numbers look great. 19 to 29, so that was good. And high YPA, 238 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, like, where have they been hiding? What I want to know is, like, how bad is he in practice that they're like, no, we got to start Malik Willis. Yeah, we know Malik can't throw the ball, but I don't know. That's crazy. He had a phenomenal game. It helped Derrick Henry in the run game.
You figure we see Levis pretty much the rest of the way?
I think they'd be crazy to put Tannehill back in there. I mean, they spent a second-round pick on him.
Yeah.
And he came out and played gangbusters. Just give him as much as he can handle. He knows mission 1 and mission 2. Get the ball to D-Hop, get the ball to King Henry. He did both of those things just fine. Now, will the defense be able to keep up? We'll see. He's going to make some mistakes. Accuracy was not his calling card in college, but he's got a big arm and he's got good size. He's going to take some sacks. He's like a little bigger Sam Howell. So I expect he'll take some sacks. He's going to make some dumb throws. They're probably not going to win a ton of games, but you don't get better not playing.
It's true. Next up, the Saints traveled to the Colts and got a 38-27 victory. The Saints offense looking remarkably better than they have in the last couple weeks, putting up 38 points. Was this the game they needed to get going?
It seems like it could have been. We just have to remember that it was against the Colts. And as nice as it is to win, it wasn't like, they overpowered, the 49ers defense or something. The Saints are a decent defense, but their offense the Colts have some decent defensive players, but their offense isn't scaring anybody right now with Gardner Minshew at the helm. I think we gotta start to seriously consider that Taysom Hill might be a weekly starter.
Yeah, he looked good there, and plus he's at the tight end position, and you can get some nice rushing yardage. Speaking of rushing for the Colts, another week, another pretty darn near even split for Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. Do you think this running back split is here to stay?
I'm not sure because Taylor outsnapped him 61-39. So he had a significant edge in on-field time. I think it might have just been a function of, how things happened to play out at the time. Taylor put up significantly better numbers, 95 yards to 66, though Moss did get the touchdown. Taylor had him 2-1 on targets in the passing game, but they didn't throw the ball to the backs much at all, just 3 targets. I feel like we're slowly seeing Taylor kind of take back over, but they have a really good they have a good enough back in Zach Moss that it's not like you can just throw him to the bench and not use him at all. I think we'll continue to see the 60-40 snap split, and the touches may stay closer than that, but I don't know that they're going to be as close to even as they were this week.
I mean, it was frustrating too because Moss is the one that gets the touchdown and ends up having better fantasy day in a game where as recently as Saturday, it seemed like they were thinking he was not going to be available to play. The Patriots traveled to Miami and the Dolphins got the 31-17 victory. Dennis, are there any receivers, are you starting to believe that maybe Kendrick Bourne is a weekly start consideration for the Patriots?
Not since he tore his ACL this week. He was leading into it, but he had that injury. He was wide receiver 25 and had become a startable wide receiver the last few weeks.
I
Even
think I
this
saw
week,
that he tore his ACL. Finally you find a New England player you can play.
So yeah, now we're looking. We're like, is it Demario Douglas? Is that who we're going to trust? Is Tyquan Thornton coming back? They signed Jalen Reagor. He was even active with 2 targets.
I heard about the Jalen Reagor signing. I mean, that would be the most New England thing to figure out how to make him go. Oh, it's they announced his torn ACL yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not sure what direction they're going to go. I know that they like Douglas. He had 7 targets. He caught 5 of them, but for only 25 yards. And he's a bit of a downfield threat, though. He's not a big guy. They're still giving too many targets to Pharaoh Brown.
Well, you got to use the tight ends. If maybe this will be an uptick from my my preseason call of Mike Gesicki, which looks better the further we go into the season. Although not this week, he only had 2 for 11. For Miami, Devin Achane is still on IR. We have Mostert and Jeff Wilson. They're mixing in a little Salvon Ahmed. How are you feeling about the backfield in Miami?
I think right now, until Achane gets back, it's Mostert. And then I think you're uncomfortably flexing Wilson. And, Ahmed isn't going to get enough run. And when Achane comes back, you're going to have to just see how it plays out. Will he displace Wilson? Will he push Mostert down the second order? You could see. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me to see a game some point this season where we see Mostert, Wilson, and Achane all have 10 carries and all of them go over 100 yards.
Yeah, that'll be something to watch. Next up, we had the Battle of New York as the Jets traveled to battle the Giants. By travel, they came out of the visitors' locker room instead of their normal home locker room, and they got the 13-10 victory. Dennis, Jets are 4-3 now. Zach Wilson has helped them win 3 straight games. Is he getting better?
No. Do you think the visitors' locker room in that stadium is better than most stadiums because both of those teams have to play an away game there?
Maybe, but they don't always have to play an away game. Don't the Jets and Giants, they only meet in the regular season
right
like once every 4 years?
Or is it that infrequently? So
yeah, you should rotate through divisions.
Zach Wilson completing 47% of his passes is not getting better. They're winning in spite of Zach Wilson. They're probably gonna pull out some more wins. They're a 500 team at best with Zach Wilson. Hopefully he keeps throwing the ball to Garrett Wilson. I'll take 7 for 100 every week, even if it takes Zach Wilson 13 targets to pull it off. Get it to your guy. They do need to get Breece Hall more carries, but if Breece is going to put up 12 carries for 17 yards, that's not inspiring a lot of confidence. Though they did lose an offensive lineman to injury this week.
And the Giants, their quarterback woes continue. Tyrod Taylor got knocked out with a rib injury, ended up spending the night in the hospital. Tommy DeVito, great stat line, 2 of 7, -1 passing yards, did have 12 yards and a touchdown as a rusher. Taylor's hurt. Jones, they had said last week they thought he would be back for week 10. This is still week 9. Could the Giants be in trouble?
Will Levis came in and threw 4 TDs. Why not Danny DeVito? I mean, they might as well have Danny DeVito out there. I'm not expecting a lot out of Tommy DeVito.
They like Tommy DeVito so much that I heard today they picked up Matt Barkley and put him on the practice squad. So
That's right.
I'm wondering if they can
Mm.
get Jones back a little earlier, maybe.
Couldn't they get Colt McCoy? Wasn't he available?
Well, I have to see. All right,
Wouldn't that be the most Giants thing of all this season, though, to rush Daniel Jones back a week early and then get him injured and lose him for the rest of the season?
that's true. That would, I mean, it's hard to. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make you think about that.
I mean, that could be the Giants. Next up, the Jaguars traveled to battle the Steelers and got the 20-10 victory. Trevor Lawrence had a pretty decent day there for the Jaguars, and they had another nice game from Travis Etienne, who actually caught a long touchdown and had a pretty good rushing day. They've won 5 straight, now 6-2. Do you like the Jaguars as contenders?
I do. I mean, the division leaders in the AFC are all tied at 6-2. The strength of victory for their wins for Jacksonville is the highest. The strength of schedule for the wins for Jacksonville is the highest. So they're playing the best competition according to the schedule analytics geeks over at what is this, NFL GSIS. So they're playing good. They're winning the games they're supposed to. They're not losing the games that they shouldn't. You know, that's a redundancy. I know. And if they can get Zay Jones back and Calvin Ridley gets on track, you know, Brenton Strange is stepping up. Travis Etienne is having a phenomenal year. Christian Kirk keeps saying, "You thought I was just going to be a slot guy." Ha. So, yeah, I think they're probably well, I don't want to say they're playing better as a team than Miami or Baltimore, but Kansas City seems to be, of the 4 division leaders, Kansas City seems to be the one that's the weakest right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Meanwhile, the Steelers, Kenny Pickett left with an injury. Mitch Trubisky comes in, throws a touchdown, 2 interceptions. The Steelers play on Thursday night. Might we be in line for more Trubisky? And how would you feel about that?
Well, Pickett came out today and said he was playing. Unfortunately for Steelers fans and Steelers fantasy managers, I think the Steelers' issues are bigger than Pickett versus Trubisky. Pickens needs to get more consistent. Deontay Johnson's back. The running game still hasn't gotten going with any consistency. I get, you know, not making changes mid-season. Usually that's not a recipe for going on a winning streak. So I don't expect the Steelers to make a change away from Matt Canada in season. But his offense clearly doesn't seem to be keeping up with the rest of the league.
No kidding. Well, next up, the Philadelphia Eagles travel to play the Washington Commanders, and the Commanders built an early lead, much as they did in the first matchup, and they fell short, much as they did in the first matchup. The Eagles get the 38-31 victory. It was a nice comeback for the Eagles. They're now 7-1. Do you think they're kind of rounding back into that contender shape?
I think they are. You know, they're starting to click on all their cylinders. All 3, their big 3 pass catchers all contributed, and A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. Heck, Julio even caught an 8-yard touchdown pass, which if I roster Olamide Zaccheaus, I'm pissed off about that. DeAndre Swift had a decent game, 57 yards.
I still don't really understand the Julio Jones signing, if I'm being honest.
A.J. Brown just needed a friend.
Well, and I get it for Julio Jones. He might just want a title shot, and that's as good as any. For the Commanders, you know, we have not seen Jahan Dotson do a whole lot this season, but 8 catches, 108 yards, and a touchdown, 10 targets. Was this kind of an encouraging sign if you're rostering Dotson?
To quote my girl Lizzo, it's about damn time.
Hey, and if you had Lizzo being quoted on this week's Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, you won your pool.
Dotson he's a really good wide receiver. It's Curtis Samuel is the guy who's going to suffer because of it. Brian Robinson had a decent game, but only 10 carries, but 59 yards. You're not going to hang your hat on 5.9 rushing yards.
I just think he's more of a running back 3 anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what. And Washington dumped half their defensive line, so they.
I mean, yeah. If I'm literally, it's like, hey, I think we can compete. All right, let's trade away our 2 best defensive linemen.
Compete with what?
I don't know what I get it, but if you're going to do that, why not move anybody that you could have gotten rid of? They said they wouldn't move Brissett unless they got a 2nd-round pick. He ain't doing you any good. Let Sam stay out there and get slaughtered. Put some nobody behind him like Danny DeVito and Bryce Callahan or one of those guys.
I mean, if you value Jacoby Brissett that high, why wouldn't you just give him a shot then? I mean, if you really think he's that great, or do they just feel like they need a backup?
97 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Maybe they're just worried that they let Sam Howell get pounded into the ground every week.
And he only took 2 sacks this week. Yeah. That's got to be like a Sam Howell personal record.
Next up, we had the battle of number 1 and number 2 overall picks as the Texans came to Carolina and the Panthers got their first win. There are no more winless teams in the NFL. Panthers get the 15-13 victory. This, CJ Stroud started really hot, but the last couple of weeks before the bye and then coming out of the bye, not quite the same guy. He was an early guy I liked as potential rookie of the year. Do you start to have any concerns?
This is where CJ Stroud has to earn his money. The first few games, he was out of nowhere. Nobody expected anything out of him. Playing over his head, throwing 35, 40, 45 times a game. He only threw it 24 times this game. And to be fair, the running game was performing probably just about as good as it had all season. But teams now have 6 or 7 games of film on him, and they can start to, these good defensive coaches are going to take a look like, what are his tendencies? What's he better at? What can we take away from him? And now Stroud has to make the adjustments. Noah Brown, Nico Collins had 6 targets, led the team, but only 30 yards on 4 catches. Tank Dell, 3 for 16. It was a lot of short stuff this week. And I think that he's got to be able to execute that, but he also has to be able to pick his spots and hit them to keep the defense honest. I think Carolina just played a good game against him. I'm still on board with CJ Stroud. The Dynasty Nerds on their podcast this week, I think it was this week, maybe last week, they did a redraft of the rookies, and they took Stroud at the 101. Mute.
Meanwhile, we've seen Bryce Young has struggled a little bit this season. Coming out of the bye, though, 22 of 31, 235 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. Was this a step in the right direction for the number 1 overall pick?
Yeah, I think you have to be able to, take every little victory you get and stack it and call it progress. 235 yards on 22 completions and only 31 attempts. That's a boost. He was throwing everything real close to the line of scrimmage. But Thielen, 11 targets, 8 catches, 72 yards. That's a decent enough YPA for Thielen. He's got to be able to get the ball downfield to some others. Mingo had 4 for 62, so he was getting the ball downfield. One of them was a 40-yarder. And his completion percentage was pretty good. You're going to take that all day. Thielen has a 35% target share in his last three games. He's been a target hog all season. I think if Young can keep kind of on his pace, get those attempts up around the 35 range with about a 65% completion rate, Thielen could end up being a league winner.
I know it has been pretty great. On to the afternoon games, Browns traveled to Seattle. The Seahawks got the 24-20 victory. Dennis, for the Browns, is it just too many injuries for them?
On the offensive side of the ball, yes. I mean, this is another game where PJ Walker did not pass for 50% completions. Kareem Hunt and Pierre Strong and Jerome Ford all averaged around 4 yards per carry. What they have about 33 carries amongst the three of them. That's fine. They were balanced. They're just PJ Walker ain't it, man. Amari Cooper had 11 targets, only caught 6, did put up 89 yards. Now, if you started David Njoku, you're super happy. 4 for 77 for 1. But Elijah Moore only 2 for 5. Doesn't look like Peoples-Jones earned a single target. And now he's gone.
I know. Meanwhile, for the Seattle Seahawks, another decent game for Jackson Smith-Njigba. He caught 3 for 36 and the game-winning touchdown. Are you liking what you're seeing from him?
You just want to see him continue to make progress. It's going to be a challenge to earn targets at a high volume with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett there. They had 23 targets between the two of them out of the 37 attempts that Geno Smith had. So Smith-Njigba's got to do what he did. He converted 75% of his targets. He got in the end zone, and that's what he's going to have to keep doing to be productive, keep earning trust. The running game worked reasonably well. They only had 13 carries between the top two backs, but they put up about 110 yards between the two of them.
Next up, the Baltimore Ravens traveled to play the Arizona Cardinals in what ended up being Josh Dobbs' final game as a starter for the Cardinals. The Ravens got the 31-24 victory. Dennis, Gus Edwards, 19 carries, 80 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Kind of a huge explosion there in the scoring. Do you think that could be a sign of things to come?
They're going to try to run the ball. And I think the 3 touchdowns is fluky. He did have 80 yards on the ground. You love to see that. He didn't. He only had 2 targets. He caught both of them for 14 yards. Some of the other backs maybe a little bit better. Justice Hill was 4 for 4 for 40 yards. Prior to his injury, J.K. Dobbins was the best all-around back on the team, and I don't think any of the running backs that they currently have can kind of play that full game like Dobbins did. But Edwards is going to continue to dominate the carries and get the occasional target. Hill is going to get some receptions and the occasional carry. I think you start Gus as an RB2, and you just kind of, if you have to start Justice Hill, you're hoping he can get you, one of these 4 for 40 type of games and give you 8 points.
Next up for the Arizona Cardinals, we don't know exactly who's going to be throwing it this week. They had previously said it wasn't going to be Kyler Murray, but you never know with Dobbs being gone. But we did see Trey McBride with Zach Ertz now on IR have something of a breakout game. 14 targets, caught 10 passes for 95 yards and a touchdown. He had been getting an uptick in activity in recent weeks before this, but do you like the trajectory he's headed on?
So McBride was the number 1 tight end in last year's class. And by and large, I think we still temper expectations for even the best tight ends to break out in year 2 or 3. He had Zach Ertz in front of him, who was playing very well. But now with Ertz on IR, I think we'll continue to see McBride be that short area safety guy. I know Dobbs is going to be gone. It wouldn't surprise me to see Kyler Murray back this week, but Clayton Tune is supposed to be the starter this week. If he struggles in the first half, I think we see a dramatic entrance from Kyler Murray to start the second half. they've got some young talent there. Michael Wilson had caught 4 or 6 for 58. He's been having a good year, and the combination of Wilson and Trey McBride gives them the size that they don't have with Hollywood Brown and Rondale Moore and Greg Dortch. He makes up for that. And DeMarcado keeps the running game honest. JJ Zachariason pointed out Trey McBride had a 39% target rate this last week.
I still don't think you activate Kyler Murray and leave him on the bench. So
I don't think so either.
I mean, I think if they activate him, he's starting. If they don't activate him, he's not playing. But I guess we will see. Stranger things have happened. Next up, the Bengals, fresh off a bye, went to San Francisco and dealt the 49ers their third straight loss, a 31-17 victory. Dennis, slow start for the Bengals offense. Joe Burrow looked like he needed to work some things out. He looked pretty darn good on Sunday, 28-32. 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, ran 6 times for 43 yards. Are the Bengals getting back into fighting shape?
They are. That calf seems to be healing up. I mean, he was running. He put up about half as many yards as Joe Mixon did on like a third of the carries. So, and his arm was always there, and I wasn't worried about it. That's why in the show league, that's why I traded Lamar Jackson for Joe Burrow, because I felt like I'm going to hang around the playoff line. Now, I'm at 9. I got some work to do to get back up to 6, but my team is starting to come back together. Got to keep stacking victories to get that, latch a hold of that 6th playoff spot. I would have liked to have seen Higgins get in the end zone too. Higgins is going to need to get more touchdowns because they're just going to feed Jamar Chase to the point. He had 12 targets to Higgins 6, and I don't think you can get a wide receiver 2 season out of Higgins if he's only getting 6 targets a game.
Next up for the 49ers, it was a loss, but George Kittle, 11 targets, caught 9 passes for 149 yards. Were you encouraged by the day we saw there for Kittle?
Well, with Debo out, it made sense for somebody to step up. And unfortunately, it wasn't Juwan Jennings this week. So,
or Ayuk either week. I mean, Ayuk had an okay game this week, 5 for 109, but I thought he was just going to ball out the last 2 weeks.
I mean, no, he seemed to only have eyes for Kittle this week. Kittle just converted him. I don't know. Purdy's been struggling the last 3 games. Hasn't quite been able to put it together. McCaffrey, only 12 carries, 54 yards, though he saved himself with 6 catches for 64 yards and 2 touchdowns, 1 on the ground and 1 in the air. Right now, there isn't a receiver not named Debo or Ayuk hasn't stepped up to be reliable when Debo or Ayuk is out. I don't know if we'll see anybody do that. I'm not counting on Ray McLeod. I thought Jennings might after last week, but Jennings isn't consistent. He didn't even earn a single target this week.
I like Jennings too. I had thought he was going to – you never know, I guess. Next up, the most surprising game of the afternoon, the Chiefs traveled to Denver where they had won 16 straight times against the Broncos and came away with the 24-9
Looks
loss.
like they're starting a new streak.
Yeah. The Chiefs have Miami in Germany this next week. They just came off a big battle with the Chargers. Do you think this might have been a trap game, or is this a worrying sign? They did have 5 turnovers.
So, I mean, it's the Nagy effect. Matt Nagy is back in Kansas City, and he's like, oh, I got Patrick Mahomes. I can do whatever I want. Well, no, you can't. You need Rashee Rice, as good as he's been playing, had a couple bad drops. Kelsey, as good as he is just a human being. What did he have? Only 6 for 58. I don't know that it was a trap game, but it was a game they expected to win. And hell, for all that was going on, they still did only 8 carries for Pacheco. Mahomes threw it 38 times. I mean, that Denver just didn't let him have the ball the way they were turning it over. And Denver just kept the ball from him.
Yeah, for the Broncos, the running game continuing to round into shape. The defense has been markedly better since that Miami disaster. And the Broncos, who were expected to be sellers, did not make a single trade today. Do you think they're coming together for something of a second half run?
Maybe. Williams had a very Joe Mixon-esque game, the 27 carries for 85 yards. Judy and Sutton, I mean, Russell threw the ball 19 times and only completed 12 of them. And 3 of them he got in the end zone. It was just one of those days where the defense that had been playing just awful, no offense intended, stepped up and made plays when they had to. Maybe it was a little bit of Kansas City looking ahead to Miami and Germany, but Denver just didn't want to be taken for granted, and they grounded out. Sean Payton had a plan, and it seems to have worked this week.
Next up, the Chicago Bears traveled to the Los Angeles Chargers for Sunday Night Football, and the Chargers got the 30-13 victory. Dennis Tyson Bagent was a big hero after getting a win in his first start. 25-37, 232 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a 17-point loss in start number 2 as the bloom coming off the rose.
I mean, did it really bloom? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. So
there were some Bears fans that unironically thought he should start over Fields.
I mean, he's a small school kid with a great story. He's the only undrafted Division II quarterback to ever start a game in the NFL. Great story. Dad's a 398 millionth time arm wrestling champion. He wins titles with both arms. It's a cool story, but he's got to execute. Cole Kmet, great, 10 for 10, 79 yards, but you need more than 4 for 55 out of DJ Moore. I was the first play of the game, that 41-yard pass to Mooney. I got to be honest, I was excited, and then they just couldn't do anything with it after that. He couldn't. He had some deep throws. And that was my biggest knock, was that he didn't throw the ball deep. He's throwing everything. I think he had like a 4.2 yard per attempt ADOT. And it was just his ADOT was like 2 yards lower than the next quarterback. It just never, after hitting that 41-yarder, he just could never put it back together again.
Meanwhile, for the Chargers, rookie Quentin Johnson, 6 targets, caught 5 passes for 50 yards. Are you encouraged by the step up in usage?
You have to be, but also with Palmer getting dinged up a little bit, it's almost like they were like, who else do we have? Somebody's got to get out there, at least throw the ball. If you see him open, Justin, throw it to him. You don't have anybody else. I mean, we'll take it. What did he have? 5 for 6 for 50? Maybe that's the type of thing that he needs to get going. And maybe the Chargers should go back and look at the tape and the things that Quentin Johnson does well, and why they drafted him, and stop trying to use him like Mike Williams, because that's not what he does well. If they can figure that out, maybe this is the springboard.
Next on to Monday Night Football, the Lions getting the 26-14 victory over the Las Vegas Raiders. Dennis, we know that Javonte Adams has been upset of late about not getting the ball. Well, last night's game did not help that. Jimmy G, just a paltry 10 of 21 for 126 yards and an interception. targeted Adams 7 times, but he only got 1 reception for 11 yards. And I'm going to be honest, a couple of those balls not particularly catchable. What do we make of the Davante Adams Raiders situation?
Man, he's got a shitty quarterback and a shitty play caller and a mediocre offensive line. I mean, I think we're just going to see him. We're about 60 minutes of game time from seeing him just go out there and cash paychecks, short arm it so he doesn't get hit. I mean, we saw Randy Moss do it on the Raiders several years ago. He felt like the team was quitting, and so he quit on the team. I think we're going to see that same situation again in Las Vegas. I don't know that McDaniel survives the season.
If you're already having special meetings with the players and all the coaches to air grievances and you haven't even hit your bye week, not a good sign. Meanwhile, for Detroit, Jahmyr Gibbs was the leader in the backfield again, 152 yards and a touchdown on 26 carries, 5 receptions for 37 yards. They're going to the bye this week. You figure David Montgomery probably closer to coming back, but do you think Gibbs has earned a bigger role?
Earned, yes. Can he physically handle it? I don't know about that. I'm a little nervous about Jahmyr Gibbs handling 31 touches on any kind of regular basis at 199 pounds. I'd love to see him.
Craig Reynolds got 14 carries. Maybe you'd be happy seeing him get 14 and 4 or 5 receptions.
I would love to see Jahmyr Gibbs get 12 to 14 carries and 5 to 8 targets per game.
Because I would expect Montgomery's going to get the 20 plus. We're going to just pile drive you into the line.
That is correct. That's exactly what I expect. I mean, Gibbs looked great, explosive. He's everything that makes you go, we got to draft this guy at number 12.
Detroit's. Go ahead.
I say I spent all early part of this season talking about being afraid of Kyren Williams not being able to hold up at virtually the same size. Right
now Gibbs and Montgomery are just alternating missing games.
Right.
Detroit was actually a buyer at the trade deadline, getting Donovan Peoples-Jones. Dennis, we haven't seen a huge contribution from Jameson Williams yet. They have Josh Reynolds kind of hanging out there. They throw some deep balls to Khalif Raymond. Now they added DPJ. What do you make of that move?
One of the things that Peoples-Jones is good at is blocking. And I know we don't get fantasy points for that, but he was not earning a lot of targets. His high was 4, and he did that in 3 games. Last year, Peoples-Jones had 96 targets last year and 61 catches. I think they're telling us that we recognize that Josh Reynolds is meh. We also recognize that Jameson Williams can't do a lot of things that we need a wide receiver to do. Donovan Peoples-Jones is like a better version of Josh Reynolds, in my opinion. He's going to be, I think as soon as he can handle the playbook, he's going to step in as the starter. It wouldn't surprise me if Jameson Williams drops down to the wide receiver 4, in part because Goff has that relationship with Josh Reynolds. But we've also seen Amon-Ra St. Brown getting dinged up this season. And so they needed that. They know the Lions are good. They need to make sure they have enough depth to withstand. And I think they do with Montgomery and Gibbs and Reynolds at running back and Amon-Ra and Josh Reynolds and DPJ now and Jameson Williams. When Marvin Jones walked away to deal with some personal issues, that left a hole that needed to be filled. And I think Peoples-Jones is a great fit for what they're going to need from him. And as long as the rest of the team can stay healthy, they've got a really good offensive line. The defense is coming on. I think this really, really helps Detroit. From a fantasy perspective, I think Peoples-Jones ends up being a flex play until he proves different. I think his ceiling might be wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside on occasion.
Well, that's the wrap on week 8 games. For week 9, interesting set of buys. The Lions, the 49ers, the Jaguars, and the Broncos all on bye as our fantasy teams begin to weep. Between that and the potential that we're going to have a lot of interesting backup quarterbacks and young quarterbacks in, it could be a fun fantasy week, but it kicks off on Thursday night with the 3-4 Tennessee Titans at the 4-3 Pittsburgh Steelers. Probably Will Levis. We'll see if we get Kenny Pickett. Dennis, how are you feeling about this game?
Man, I'm gonna go with the Titans. I think you ride Will Levis. He came out smoking, and it's a situation where you just got to say, let's build on what we did last week. DeAndre Hopkins is that dude. He's like, hey, you throw me the ball, I am going to go get the ball. Let me have it. Let's see where Pittsburgh is versus wide receivers in fantasy points. Pittsburgh gives up about the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So, and to be honest, there ain't a whole lot of other wide receivers in Tennessee besides DeAndre Hopkins. And DeAndre Hopkins is a guy still at his current age that doesn't have to be breaking wide open to convert a catch. He's never covered. He's always open. And I think we'll see Derrick Henry get some more opportunities. I think, Pickett said he was going to play. I think he does. But I don't know that it matters much. Let's see, Steelers, where they go. The Steelers are giving up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs too. So this sets up to be another good game for Levis because he'll have that running back balance with Derrick Henry to be able now to, who knows, maybe he'll even get Chigo Okonkwo involved.
I don't know. I'm going to take the Steelers. I just think I do not like a rookie quarterback in his second start going into Pittsburgh against TJ Watt. I don't think this is going to be a particularly fun game to watch either.
Yeah. It'll be one of those, 17-13 barn burners.
Look, it's going to be better than Sunday afternoon when you're sitting there watching the New York Giants and Tommy DeVito against the Las Vegas Raiders. And if the rumors today are to be believed, Brian Hoyer, who will take over for a benched, because Brian Hoyer did such a good job last couple.
Why would you start Hoyer over?
That's on NFL Network. That's what they were talking about. They're like, first of all, I wouldn't make a change because I don't think Jimmy's your only problem. But if you're going to do that, why don't you just put in Aiden O'Connell and see what you got? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Speaking of tragedies, a couple of long nights, you're sitting there passing out candy to neighborhood children, just waiting for that Thursday night football game. How can they fill the time?
They should get their earbuds in so they look cool. Put on the Fantasy Football Roundtable, subscribe, download the podcast, leave us a rating and a review. Give us that 5-star. We love it.
Well, that'll do it for us today. We will be back on Friday with a look at the rest of the Week 9 slate and a recap of what promises to be a thrilling Thursday night game. You guys have a happy Halloween. Stay safe out